Welcome to The Current Potential, the podcast where healing, aligned living, and intention meet the deeper current of who we are. I'm your host, Melissa Curtin. Here we explore holistic health, mind, body, heart wisdom, empowering stories, and what's current in natural healing, all to help you reconnect with your own inner current and potential. Joining me for this episode about pelvic health is Dr. Michelle Logan. Michelle, thank you so much for being my guest. I would love for you to introduce yourself to the listeners. Can you share a little bit about your professional background in pelvic health and healing and health in general?
Melissa, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm super excited to be on your podcast that you've so graciously shared with me. I'm super excited that you're doing this. I can't think of truly just a better person to host this type of podcast. A little bit about me. So I am a pelvic floor physical therapist here at the Pelvic Doctors in downtown Easley, South Carolina. I went to MUSC in Charleston for my doctorate. For that, I went to Clemson. For that, I went to Easley High School. So I am easily born and raised and have stayed local or in the state for all my education, minus a few jaunts across state lines just for some clinical education. But it has brought me back here, back to my hometown.
When I met you, what struck me is that you're so passionate about this topic and so heart-centered around it. I felt I learned so much in the few in-person conversations we have had. Can you share what led you to the pelvic floor path as a doctor in this area? And also what schooling or degrees are required for someone to get into this field?
Yes. So I was very fortunate to be able to see pelvic floor physical therapy before I went into physical therapy school. Most people don't get that opportunity because most people don't even know what pelvic floor physical therapy is until they arrive at school. So I was super, super thankful that happened because that really set the stage for me going into PT school because I already felt like I knew what I wanted to do. And I went in to PT school with an open mind, like, okay, I really loved seeing this, but this could change and that's fine. And then I went all 3 years at MUSC and it didn't change at all. So that was super awesome for me, knowing that I wanted to do that going into it because I had seen multiple other settings of physical therapy and just none of them delivered just that one-on-one provider to client experience that was just so intimate. And I feel like that was very groundbreaking for me seeing that because a lot of physical therapy is in a lot of settings, just multiple patients or clients at once. And you kind of lose that just personal feeling, that personal touch. But with pelvic floor physical therapy, I mean, you really do have to be strictly one-on-one with them to really get to the root cause of what's going on. And it's just very, very emotional. It's very mental, in addition to being very physical. And I love that very holistic approach to each person that sits in front of me. And your other question was schooling and degrees for this. So the only other degree that I have seen is still a doctorate, but it would be occupational therapy. So it's either physical therapy or occupational therapy, but both of us, like both degrees can go into a pelvic health specialty.
Interesting. And what other additional courses or certifications, are there any on top of going through that program? So similar to a doctor, like one that specializes in cardiology or whatever the path is?
Not much of any specialty really you do in school. So physical therapy school, almost like any other program, they want you to graduate as a generalist so that you could fit in any clinical setting and be able to work professionally there. That's what they want, for everyone to be very flexible. With that said, if you choose to pursue a specialty, especially in this case, pelvic health, then yes, there are additional coursework to do. You can do them. There's two big ones. So you can either do it through the APTA, which is the big governing board for physical therapy, the national board. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is Herman and Wallace, which is a private entity, but both of them provide coursework for continuing education for pelvic health. Yes. So in my case, I've done Pelvic Health 1 and Pelvic Health 2, both courseworks and the labs, which are in person. And have received certification for that, and am currently pursuing my postpartum corrective exercise specialty.
Wonderful. Now, can someone do this
Yes.
work without a doctorate in physical therapy? And then, if so, what are the difference in the scope of what you can practice?
There should be a doctorate degree behind any provider that's doing an internal exam. So if you think physical therapy or occupational therapy or an OBGYN, otherwise it's very hard to justify why an internal exam is being done if there's no clinical or educational background to support it. With that said, if there is external work that's being done, then you can have a physical therapy assistant or an occupational therapy assistant that has, again, education to support that can also do that. And that is not a doctorate degree.
What is the scope of a pelvic floor doctor?
A pelvic floor physical therapist, our scope is still very similar to that of any other physical therapist. I mean, we work with the musculoskeletal system. So if there is any dysfunction pelvic floor wise that results in symptoms, for example, like leakage, like urinary leakage, bowel leakage, pain, anything like that, that can be associated with, okay, how is that musculoskeletal system functioning just like any other muscle in the body? So our scope forever and always is we're going to treat the musculoskeletal system and we're going to treat movement patterns and coordination. So when it kind of goes out of our scope is, okay, there's an infection here, or there is some sort of organ related disorder going on. That is when we start thinking, okay, we need to bring in another provider here to look at this.
Another question that makes sense to ask is, what other practitioners do you work with most in tandem care?
We work in tandem a lot with OBGYNs, with midwives, with doulas. So a lot of our population, especially in women's health and women's pelvic floor physical therapy, is going to be surrounding pregnancy and postpartum, but then also menopause, perimenopause, and really all ages and all eras of life, if you will. But those tend to be our biggest ones: pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, and perimenopause.
Those would be the ones that I would guess, just being, having lived some life up to this point,
Yes.
gone through many of those stages. I think of pelvic floor, I think of the Kegels from like the 80s and the 90s, right? Those thigh master exercise gadgets, or weak pelvic floor muscles like post-pregnancy, labor and delivery. But what does pelvic floor actually mean? Like, what does that refer to or include?
Yes. So Kegels is definitely part of that. A little hot take on Kegels, I have to say, is that we often do not give those out or recommend those to just anybody. I feel like it was done in the 80s, 90s, and prior to that as well. And it's still done, honestly, in a lot of cases, because what we're seeing these days is a lot of what we call hypertonic pelvic floors, or pelvic floors that are very tight, they're very closed down. So if you think about some women who have issues inserting a tampon, or they have issues with having a pap smear done at the OBGYN, and all the way up to engaging in intimacy with their partners. I mean, if there is a hypertonic and that pelvic floor is just locked down, that is, one, very frustrating for a lot of our clients, but also very painful. So that's kind of our hot take on that, where we don't necessarily give those out to everyone, because then if you're already having someone contract and engage a pelvic floor that's already very tight, then that can worsen that problem. Not saying that you shouldn't do it ever, but at least initially, that is not best practice for us anymore.
That's so interesting and expected as information is updated in the field.
Yes, it's crazy how times change, and the research changes with it. Yeah, so now a lot of times what we look at that's really big is coordination, and when is our pelvic floor contracting, because they are anticipatory muscles. So if you're thinking about when you cough, sneeze, laugh, go to lift anything heavy, your pelvic floor is contracting and engaging a split second before you do any of that.
So that's kind of important to have a strong pelvic floor.
Important. So not only do you want to have a strong pelvic floor, but you need to have a pelvic floor that turns on at the right time.
So I'm curious, what are the common symptoms and issues where someone would seek a pelvic floor specialist?
Common symptoms we see pelvic floor wise is leakage. That's going to be the number one that we see, especially in women. And, and in addition to that, there can be pelvic pain, pain with intimacy. But then also, if you're looking at something like for birth prep or pregnancy prep or even postpartum recovery, that's what we like to see.
And then what are some common myths or misconceptions about pelvic floor work or issues?
One of my favorite ones that is pretty common is that if somebody has a C-section birth, so specifically pregnancy postpartum, if you have a C-section, it does not affect your pelvic floor. It does, because if you think about the entire 9 months that you're growing the baby, that is increased load and force on those pelvic floor muscles that rest and live at the bottom of your pelvis. So it's having to support and adapt to that for the entire 9 months. And if they are not equipped, or if there is anything that happens, a C-section does not erase the fact that, okay, they've just gone 9 months with all this additional load, and now it's just magically gone. Does that mean the problem's gone? Not necessarily. So that's a big one.
Interesting. Are you seeing more and more women come post-pregnancy, both C-section and vaginal birth?
Yes. So a lot of them will seek pelvic floor PT for a number of reasons. And most of them will start seeking pelvic floor PT in pregnancy or when they first find out that they're pregnant. That's when they start at least looking to see, okay, where can I go for some support?
And is that the best time for a better birth outcome for someone to see a pelvic floor specialist would be prior to delivering the baby?
This is my favorite question so far, and it is a resounding yes. I mean, we see it in the literature over and over again that our moms that are coming into pelvic floor physical therapy prior to having or to walking into that labor and delivery room are having much better outcomes on the other end. Why? One, because we're addressing any coordination issues right in the get-go. But then two, we're also coaching them through, okay, what position are you in where you get the best relaxation of your pelvic floor? And that looks different for everybody. I mean, that can be on hands and knees, that can be in a deep squat, that can be in so many different positions. It's very rarely ever on your back, especially when you're in labor and delivery. So and especially when that brings in that internal exam and internal work. I mean, we really have that ability to feel and be able to give feedback in real time to our clients to say, yeah, now that you're here in this position, this is where you're getting the full relaxation. And a lot of times they take that into the labor and delivery room and have such great outcomes with birth because they're like, oh, I already know this is a very relaxing position for me. Therefore, it's a very relaxing position for my pelvic floor. And that a lot of times is very helpful in keeping birth going.
It sounds like there's some techniques or exercises or things that you can help. Therefore, take some of the fear out. And like you said, relaxing that area.
Yes.
Have a better birth outcome. Now there might be men listening as well. And I thought one of the misconceptions of pelvic floor, and this is before I met you, is it just women that come and see you? But earlier in the interview, you mentioned, this is all ages. Does this across, male, female,
Absolutely. Yes. Pelvic floor applies to everybody. Everybody's got a pelvic floor, whether you're a man or a woman. If this is breaking news to you, I'm glad you heard it here.
That's great. Well, because I was thinking too, I do encounter, men who are having, whether it's prostate or testicular cancer or issues, so similar to getting the physical therapy care in the pelvic floor area prior to birth. I mean, prior to different cancer treatments or surgeries, would you recommend the same for someone going through that situation?
Absolutely. And if you think about even just comparing this to any other muscular area of the body, so like a knee or a hip, if people are going in to have surgery on their knee or hip and getting a total knee replacement or a total hip, they're always indicated and referred to physical therapy prior to going into surgery. to make sure, okay, are we going in with the greatest range of motion possible, with the greatest strength possible, motor control, all of those aspects, because that improves their outcomes on the other end. It's the exact same with physical therapy. If they're, or sorry, with pelvic floor physical therapy, if they're going in for any sort of surgery, or for our men, that can be that prostatectomy or removal of the prostate if there's cancer involved, or an enlarged prostate that is now impinging on other things in the area, then yes, going into pelvic floor PT prior to surgery is going to improve your outcomes on the back end. And that's actually best practice and the practice that is done in Colorado. And that's where I was privileged enough to do some of my clinical rotation. And that was where we saw a lot of our male patients. Was a lot of them were going in for prostatectomy, so they came to pelvic floor PT prior.
And would you say that they had better outcomes for their surgery or their healing and recovery journey?
Yes, I mean all of them, because we would be with them over this entire journey and experience for them before, and then we would see them not long after, and then towards the end of their plan of care. So we see the entire evolvement of that. All of them on the back end were like, we cannot imagine going through this with no support or no information prior that we received in pelvic floor physical therapy.
And it sounds like you're involved in the whole process from the beginning through the end and taking into account the whole person, the whole patient, which leads me into something that you and I have discussed in the past is like, you know, in the way that you approach your care plans, it sounds very individualized. How do you, in the pelvic floor work that you do, how do you integrate a holistic approach? Because as you were saying earlier, whether you're coughing or sneezing or bending over, whatever it is, you're involving the pelvic floor, but it's beyond that. To me, I mean, I feel like we're not these compartmentalized pieces and fragments. We are a whole being. Can you speak to a holistic approach? Because there is the mental, emotional, right? And you were talking, and even if we extend that to trauma, there's so many aspects of what would affect the pelvic floor. Can you speak more to how you integrate a holistic approach?
Even from a holistic approach too, which is always the approach, we want to include and encompass the entire person that's sitting in front of us. So from a physical aspect, we're not just focusing on the pelvic floor to fix a problem that's located in the pelvic floor. Often what we see, especially in the case of something like leakage, what we see is the problem could be much higher or much lower than the location of just the pelvic floor. So a lot of times we may start there, but then continue to explore, like, okay, where is the root cause of this issue? And it can be found as low as the feet and how people have been walking for years and years and years, or it can be found as high as the shoulders or the chest area. And then that's when we're getting more into, okay, how are we breathing? Are we breathing and getting full rib expansion? Are we able to breathe and expand ribs to the side, to the back, or is everything just coming towards the front? So that's where, you know, it's not just about, okay, pelvic floor function, it's the entire body. How's the whole body functioning? And then what you're also saying too, as far as trauma, that's when we also will bring in other providers like trauma-informed therapists to really coordinate together to make sure, okay, how can we support this person physically, but also support this person mentally and emotionally, because they go hand in hand. There is no separation of a traumatic experience that may have happened 20 years ago and the pelvic floor dysfunction they're experiencing today. There is no like compartmentalizing of that. They are going to affect each other equally.
Yes, of course.
So you have to consider.
How do you make someone feel comfortable when working on such a vulnerable area of the body? Like, because you mentioned earlier that, you know, there is physical release work, right? And, you know, other, I don't know what the technical terms are, but, you know, but other manipulation that's happening. So, especially if somebody has trauma, but aside from trauma, just in general? I mean, what does that look like in that setting? Because it's very intimate one-on-one setting.
Absolutely. So that really comes in the first 20 to 30 minutes of first meeting, first talking to one another. You really get to know that person in front of you, and you just really want to hear their story and just hear how they speak about what symptoms that they may have been experiencing that bothers them, and kind of hear how they speak about that and other things that they give you, like information wise and body language wise. Kind of gives you an idea of, okay, what is this person going to be comfortable with today? Like, what progress can we make today? Because it's not going to be progress at all if we do an internal exam day one and this patient or this client is not comfortable with that. Then it's not that goes against the entire goal of, okay, how can we help this patient today? So other things that we can do day one, I mean, there's always external work that we can do for sure. And that can look like targeting the hips or targeting, again, that breathing mechanism, or looking at the feet. And that's all external that we can do day one and assess and make lifelong changes with day one. But then also, it's getting that client comfortable with your touch, right? Especially if you've never met them before, they don't know you and you don't know them. So how can we get them just comfortable with us laying hands on them? And that's where we can get real interesting, and we can do nervous system improvements, especially when you're talking about the vagus nerve. That's going to be our driver of the parasympathetic nervous system that allows us to rest and digest. That's how we like to describe him. It really eases the entire body. So we can do that on day one, especially if a client is uncomfortable or very nervous about pelvic floor PT. And that really also just makes a big difference in the function of their pelvic floor if they're able to just get out of fight or flight, or that high, just sympathetic nervous system state. Mm-hmm.
Kind of being more grounded and just getting into their own relaxation state and
absolutely
resting all those muscles. Otherwise, it's just a ball of nerves, like you said, in fight or flight, which is probably not fun as the client or the provider to work on them. I mean, it sounds like a very compassionate, sensitive approach to this. Why do you do what you do? I mean, you love what you do. I'm just curious why.
I feel like over the past several years, I mean, it really started with that initial encounter before I went to physical therapy school and being able to meet some of these wonderful pelvic floor physical therapists that are in Greenville. And not only was just that short amount of time that I was able to spend with them just very comforting and inspiring, but I think it's also just been the culmination over the years of seeing how much of a need that there is for this specific population, but then also how supportive the entire women's health, healthcare, just provider aspect is. I mean, it is wonderful. Everybody is so excited for you to step into this space and with open arms, which I feel like is very not the norm for most of healthcare. Usually they either don't care or they gatekeep, they've like found something that works, but they hide it and they hold on to it and don't share it with other providers because they want to capitalize off it. And I think that is quite the opposite when it comes to women's health. Everybody is very excited to share, very excited to make any sort of move that can help you or the clients that you're able to see, which is amazing. And yes, I have no children of my own, but I've seen many of my friends go through the birth experience and have been with them through that experience. And it's something that's just very touching when you can step into a space that's as intimate as birth, for example, and you can do so much good with them and be so helpful in that space and especially to like your friends and family, there is no better feeling than being able to walk out of that room and just be like, okay, I mean, that was fantastic experience, and now everyone has grown for the better of it.
I mean, it sounds really beautiful for just to support.
Absolutely.
To give them the physical, literal strength, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Also tying in that, the mental health and the mental wellness aspect of that. It sounds like it's all connected. So I've recently read about the connection between the throat area and the pelvic area. What are your thoughts about how this relates, and could you provide some examples of how this might show up?
Absolutely. So that energetic connection, you're absolutely right. It is a connection that we see from the throat to the pelvic floor, all the way down to the feet, actually, which is fascinating. And we see that because of the fascial connections or the connective tissue connections between all of the muscles in this region. So, especially when you're thinking about, okay, what is going up or going on up here at the mouth, and how would that affect pelvic floor function? The best example I can give you truly is tension. A lot of people hold tension in their jaw, in their shoulders, and they're walking around doing life with their shoulders up to their ears. They don't even realize it, or clenching their jaw. So if that's happening up here, the pelvic floor is a mirror as well. It is mirroring that, and also clenched and holding tension here in the pelvic floor, all the way down to the toes. It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy just how that energy connection will travel truly from head to toe. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said earlier, we're not these isolated, we're not just an arm or, I mean, we are the whole body
exactly.
being on so many different levels, especially with
Mhm.
the energetic and the fascia and the connective tissue and all
Mhm.
together. So thank you for
Yes.
elaborating on that. Is there anything lacking in this field, and what is your vision for the pelvic floor field?
So, two things, maybe three, that I would love to see in the coming years for pelvic floor physical therapy is just the indication and pulling us in as providers for women who have C-sections. So, if you think about it, it's a major abdominal surgery
Mm-hmm.
that these women are going through, and they are not being referred to any sort of physical therapy prior or after. And there's really no other surgery that is being done that is not happening. They're always referred to conservative care and support, either prior to and after, or after at the very least. So I would love to see physical therapy also indicated for our women who are going through C-section, to be able to support them, and that be normal practice. So that's one. And then two, I would also love to see pelvic floor physical therapy enter the hospital system. And I feel like that's what's going to be very beneficial, again, for women who are going through either C-section or vaginal birth, to be able to come into contact and meet a pelvic floor therapist in real time at the hospital before they even leave to go home. So they have all the information and resources that they need on the back end to be successful. And third one would be our men. I would also, again, love to see more of practice that I mentioned earlier was happening in Colorado, to be able to support our men and male pelvic health. And that whenever they go in for any sort of surgery for the prostate, for testicular cancer, I mean, really anything, that, again, physical therapy would be indicated for them to come in and receive the support that they need to have best and better outcomes on the back end.
Sounds fantastic, and a way to
Yes.
expand. Did you have any inspiring resource or quote or anything that you wanted to share with the listeners?
I don't necessarily have like one quote. I definitely have resources, but I think just a concept that I think is very important, and a lot of women experience, especially in the case of some conversations or providers, is that, I mean, especially if we're experiencing any sort of dysfunction or anything, that you are not the problem. Okay. You are not broken. And there's always someone who is listening, and it may not feel like it. I mean, there's definitely conversations that happen in a period, but even in the healthcare world, that is not very empowering to women. But there is someone who is listening and will listen to you and help you rise above whatever it is that you're experiencing. And then a resource. Since we're on a podcast, I think it's maybe very fitting to bring in a podcast resource. I think a really awesome one. She is a wonderful pelvic floor therapist. Her name is Dr. Nicole Cozine, and she's actually located in Atlanta. So she's not that far from us. But she has a wonderful podcast called Pelvic PT Rising, and it is on Spotify and probably most other platforms to listen to podcasts. But she goes through a lot of, again, women's health and support, and also best practice on the physical therapy end and what to expect if you are looking for pelvic floor physical therapy. So awesome resource to just listen on your commutes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing that one. And also, how can listeners learn more, and those that are local here to this area, we're in the Greenville upstate area, how can they work with you? Where do they find you? And I'll put that all in the show notes as well.
Fantastic. Yes. So I am located in downtown Easley, right on Main Street. So if you find our location, the most obvious name is going to be the Movement Doctors. That is our sister brand, our parent brand, if you will. But we are right above them. We are the sub brand of the Pelvic Doctors. So we're right upstairs, right above the Movement Doctors. And if you are looking for a place to come, I mean, I was saying earlier too that our upstairs space has just opened. So yes, my contact info, I believe, for Melissa will be in the show notes. So you can absolutely reach out to me. And if you want to have a tour, we can make that happen.
I think I've seen it advertised where you guys do community classes as well.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. We are looking forward to announcing very soon. So either on our Facebook or Instagram, we will be announcing this very soon and doing a partnership in Easley and having a lot of community classes. So we're hoping to do it monthly throughout the entire year of 2026 so that everyone has an opportunity to catch us and meet us and vice versa. So we also have an opportunity to catch and meet others who live in our beautiful city. So stay tuned. It's coming.
Thank you so much. It's just really a pleasure to learn more. And if there's anything else you'd like to share, let me know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Melissa. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. Well, you're such a, wealth of knowledge, and that is the point.
Yeah.
When I meet such wonderful people, including yourself, and just getting information out there for people that might be completely new to someone. And to the listeners, thank you for joining us for this insightful conversation with Dr. Michelle Logan on pelvic floor health, the core of it all. Thank you for tuning into the Current Potential podcast. If this conversation resonated, inspired your next step, or you know someone this episode can benefit, please share, subscribe, and find me on Instagram at The Current Potential for new episodes and related content, and on my website, melissacurtin.com. Until next time, be aligned, stay connected to your inner wisdom, and follow the current that supports your potential.